whoever that IT was going to set it up, but I don't know if they did.
All right, it doesn't really matter. We can be
of course.
very informal. So my name is Amy Chu, and I'm a professional comics writer and now animation writer. So I worked on just about every mainstream character. Most of what I do is Marvel and DC. So you can see some of the stuff I've worked on. Most people know me for Poison Ivy. That was my first full-time, I should say full-time, what am I saying? My first series. And then the stuff that people, of course, are more interested in is I did a little Rick and Morty. And, of course, I did a little bit of Deadpool as well. Every now and then I get to do some Wonder Woman, so it's very mainstream. More recently, I've been doing some horror stuff. I don't even know if I have any slides for that. I just came out with a graphic novel called Carmilla. Are you all familiar with?
That's the vampire one, right? Okay.
Yes. Okay. And here's the thing, right? If you do you know who Carmilla is?
She's is she the first written vampire or something like
She's
that?
she preceded Dracula,
Yeah.
the 2016. Dracula is literally based on Carmilla, but everyone knows Dracula. Yeah, right? Everyone knows Dracula, but Carmilla came first. Dracula is literally the male version of Carmilla. But, right, everyone forgot about Carmilla, and now it's Dracula. I'm like, oh, that kind of sucks, right? So I read it, and I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. I mean, for something that was written 1870 whatever, it's actually a decent read, except, spoiler, they kill her at the end, because you can't have, this lesbian vampire running around, right? So she's dead. And I'm like, well, that's stupid. So maybe some of you are interested in writing. That became my pitch because Karen Berger, who is very famous comics editor at San Diego Comic Con, she said, let's have lunch. I'm like, oh my God, she's asking me out to lunch. This is amazing, right? When an editor asks you out to lunch, you go, first of all, right? And then, and here's what happens next, of course, is then she's like, oh, so what do you have? I go, oh my gosh, she's asking me to pitch. Do I have anything? And that's when I pull out Carmilla. I'm like, did you know? Fortunately, she didn't know, so that's why she got really interested. So that's an example of a successful pitch where she's like, wow, I had no idea. And then she went back, looked it up, and she's like, wow, this is a really interesting story. So can you do it? I'm like, oh yeah, of course, I will do this, right? So that's like my late, of course, do I have a copy on me? I just gave it over breakfast to a friend of mine who's in town for his book signing. He's doing his own book, which is, of course, going to be so much more, because he was like, yeah, he got a 6-figure deal on that book. I'm like, oh, this is such a whiny bitch, this guy. Anyway, he's complaining about his publisher is not providing support for him, and he had to do the CBS interview all by himself. And I'm like, oh, so annoying. Anyway, back to what I was saying. I gave him the copy I had, so I can't show it to you. But Carmilla is out there. And it did well enough. It got into second printing, so now I just turned in the sequel, so that's happening. But yeah, anyway, so I am mostly, does anyone know, here's a question. Does anyone know the game Borderlands? Borderlands, yeah? Oh, okay, thank God. Because last time I brought this up, people were like, Borderlands? Then I felt really old.
I've never played, but I'm familiar with it.
Okay, so I'm working on that graphic novel. So I just turned in the second chapter for that. So basically, I'm busy. When you're in comics specifically, it's like being a journalist. It's deadline, deadline, deadline. So even now, I've got 3 more books I got to work on. I just turned in the Borderlands chapter, and I'm a little nervous because one of the characters they said I could use, which was a couple of years ago, they didn't tell me that they put that character in New Tales of the Borderlands. So this character, Lore, I don't know if you know, she was originally Lorelei. Now Lorelei is a he, Lore, right? So this character transitioned, and they did warn me. They did say the character is transitioning. I'm like, that's fine. That makes it more interesting. But they didn't tell me that that character was already going to be out there while I'm writing this character. So welcome to comics, right? Especially licensed comics. Whenever you're dealing with stuff like a game, or in this case, like Wonder Woman or Poison Ivy, when you're playing in somebody else's universe, you have to constantly check to see what's going on, because if you start writing something, and that's what the editor is there to say, oh my God, you can't put Batman in, right? Because Batman's doing something else. Or in the case of, again, the Lorelei, there's a whole thing of like, they're like, oh no, this is actually an NPC character. I'm like, well, can I use this NPC character as a bigger character? I just basically went with it. Okay. And that's okay. I think they're going to let me do it. But stuff like, I just did the Turning Red graphic novel. Okay, so that is, and of course, did I bring any? I'm sorry. But Turning Red, which is really fun, but the thing is they had me write it while they were still animating it. So I'm writing it, and they're literally changing the script while I'm doing it. Okay, so that's just craziness, right? And I'm like, how can I do that? Disney's like, you figure it out, right? I'm like, it doesn't work that way. I cannot make stuff up. I literally, so while they're animating, they're sending me screenshots of the script, and that's how I had to work with that. But that's very unusual. Usually, if I am doing Marvel or DC, I just say, okay, this is my pitch. Deadpool does this, this, and this, and they're like, cool, run with it, and usually don't have to worry about anything else. Now, if I want to make my life harder, that's when I say, okay, I want Deadpool to meet up with Wolverine. The more that you have other characters coming in, that's when people are like, hold up, we got to check with that group, make sure you can use whoever it is. Anytime you do a crossover, they will say, well, okay. Like the Star Wars folks are the worst at this. I don't do any Star Wars because it's a nightmare. Because as soon as you say you want to do something, they're like, nope, hold on, we got to go up, 12 levels of Lucas, find out if you can do the thing. And they're like, you can do it. Oh, no, you can't do it. Oh, wait, somebody's got to redraw the whole thing because it doesn't look right. So it's a nightmare. Which is not to say you shouldn't do these things. You should do them because it's fun and you can make a living off of it like I do. And please ask any questions while I'm doing this. So did anyone watch this?
I heard of it.
Oh, okay. Well, if you got Netflix, watch it, right? So this is my first animation series, Dota Dragon's Blood. And so I wrote 2 episodes of it. This is my first time doing that. And I don't know if you even know or care what it's. Writing animation is similar but very different from writing comics. Like I said, it does pay a lot better. They were like, we're really sorry, but all we could get for you was minimum wage in animation, which is 35 times more than comics. So I was like, okay, I'll take it. It's fine. Yeah, so that was just craziness. And it's not 35 times, but, it was a lot more. It was a lot more, so I wasn't complaining. But the truth is, though, I can write, if you were to do this, I have plenty of work in comics. I can do that every month. I can work on multiples but to do this, you kind of have to get in the writer's room. So what happens is if you're in a room, you're essentially employed for at least 1 season, unless it gets, right? If it goes on for multiple seasons, you're employed. If the series gets canceled, now you're unemployed, and now you have to try to get back into a room. That could take years, and you may never end up getting work again. It's because it's all who you know and whether that show. So this is why people go on strike, right? You were like, oh, but they get paid. It's like, yeah, they get paid knowing that maybe you're not going to be working again for the next 3 years. So if you average it out, it's not great, okay? But for me, I can work on comics if I'm not employed on this. So this was 2 seasons. Netflix continued for 2 seasons, no 3rd season. If it had gone, what am I saying? It's 3 seasons. But I was a freelancer, so I was only on for 2 seasons. And I'm going to talk a little bit more practically, right? How do you even get in a writer's room? Generally speaking, there's only like maybe 6 to 8 people in a show. So, right, you are competing against all of Hollywood to try to get into this room. And it's very hierarchical. What you have is the showrunner's right-hand person, and then like the staff writers, and there's always like one assistant who has to do all the crap work, right? And the reason you do the crap work, usually you're straight out of college, right? So you're making minimum wage doing the crap work so you can move up into the writer's room. That's how it works in Hollywood. Now, comics is very flat. You either do it or you don't, right? There's no writer's assistant. You're either writing or you're not writing. So this is really interesting to me. I'm like watching this poor assistant because all he wants to do and all he does is run coffee, take notes, and the hope that he gets a credit, he gets to move up into the writer's room, which is what happened, which is why I don't have a third season, because that was kind of the promise is, dude, you got to like do all this crap work, and then in third season, now's your chance. You actually get, so I can't argue with that. I feel bad because I was like, yeah, but I want a third season too. But this kid, and I say kid, you know what I mean, he's like 23, has just suffered running around doing all this stuff, which is, kind of expected, but I'm like, I would never do that. This doesn't seem like a good job to me at all. But that's kind of the promise, and that's how he got in, and how now he has a TV credit, but now he's unemployed. So, right, who knows if he'll ever be employed again? That's just the way it works because, that's Hollywood. So ask me questions as we go along.
Go ahead.
Okay. Were you, like, in your early days, were you ever, like, afraid that you weren't going to ever find work? Or
No, because, okay, so look, let me get back to, and just so you know, I'm a writer. I'm not an artist, so in case people are confused. You can be a writer and an artist, but that's very specific. That means you're usually doing webcomics or you're doing kids stuff. If you're doing Marvel or DC, you're usually pretty specialized, okay? Let's get back to my background. So this is my background. I'm not even supposed to be doing this. This is alternate universe, all right? I was literally just at Harvard doing the same talk here, but it's different because people are like, what's going on? How did you do this? And it was just very, very weird, right? Where I have to explain, you can do these things, right? It's like, oh, it's so risky doing something creative. It's like, well, it's not that risky for me. If it doesn't work out, I can get another job. I have an MBA at Harvard. I mean, right? I can get another job. I'm fairly certain, okay? To do comics, writing, and animation, you do not need all this stuff, first of all. You do not need these degrees. In fact, you don't need a degree at all, as far as I'm concerned. When you're doing this kind of stuff, whether you're on the art side or the writing side, frankly, nobody cares about your credentials. They just want to know, can you do it? And can you do it well? That's really the only thing they look at. This is stuff I don't trot out because it's actually distracting. They're kind of like, what? Why are you doing this then? So I never talk about this. I only talk about this just for you all to know that it's actually a hindrance for me in my business to even, right? The degrees don't matter. Okay, sorry, I take this back. Degrees matter in that sometimes it's a built-in network for you. Let's say you went to an art school or whatever, and somebody is employed with that company. That's where that's right. It's a networking thing, but people don't literally care about that. It's really only if, right, you happen to know somebody's working at the company, and of course you hit them up, right? You're like, hey, we went to school. I don't really know you, but cover your, right? You work. Yeah, here, can you, absolutely do that if you can, right? In my case, it's not helpful at all because nobody at Harvard works in comics. That's not true, actually. They are, but they're usually in the business side. Yeah, anyway, so this is all just to say don't worry about it. You don't need it, right?
If you don't mind me asking, what was your original plan before you became a renowned writer?
Okay, so good question. First of all, plans are entirely overrated, all right? Look at me. This was not in the plan. All I was doing was trying to help my friend Georgia because she wanted to do it. I'm like, Georgia, you do it, and I'll figure out how to help you. And I just got sucked in, okay? That's literally what happened. I'm not even supposed to be doing this. What people like me tend to do is if you get an MBA, typically your main track is to either go into, because usually it's very expensive, you got to pay back all your student loans. You're going to probably finance or management consulting, that kind of stuff. Or maybe a lot of the women in my class, they want to do retail. They want to go, go into Gucci marketing or something like that, all right? That's generally what you do. Nobody goes into comics. This is totally by accident. What I was doing before was biotech consulting. I was doing business development. I was a person that, let's say, you all are an entrepreneur and you want to launch your new cancer therapeutic, and you need to raise 20 million. You come to someone like me where I'm like, yeah, I'll do your strategy, and like, ooh, 20 million is going to be tough, right? But I can figure out how to do that. And then I'll go to a venture capital, I'll fly to like San Francisco. I'll put up the PowerPoint and I'll be like, yeah, this is really innovative. Look at the scientific team. This is cutting edge stuff. All they need is just 20 million. Cheap, cheap, cheap. Okay. So that I did for like, a good 8 years of like, after a while, it's like, ooh, 20 million is pretty tough to raise, And so that's when I was like, my friend Georgia was like, yeah, but comics, you only need a couple $1,000s to print a comic book. And I'm like, wow, that sounds a lot better. That sounds a lot better. And right, how hard can this be? I've done all this PowerPointing and stuff. So what I'm trying to say is, lo and behold, PowerPoint writing is actually very similar to comics writing, right? And you're like, why is that? How is that, right? What's the similarity between writing a comic and writing a PowerPoint? Anyone?
Presentation? Like, trying to sell something?
No, well, yes. Well, you're telling a story, but so how many of you write prose or poetry, or are you just writing your novel or whatever? Anybody, right? Okay, so when you're writing, how much do you write? How much do you know how to write? Like, how much, when you think about your writing?
I suck at like making up stories, or like
Right.
making up.
Do you think about page count? Do you think about like
No.
how, you don't think about page count, right?
Well, depends, but it's mostly thinking about getting the main points.
Right, you're writing as much as it needs to express the story, right? Here's the thing about comics. American comics, 20 pages to tell the story. You need to be able to tell the full story in 20 pages, possibly even less, because if you start writing for Marvel or DC, they're like, you don't get 20 pages. We're going to give you 5. We're going to give you 5 because you're new. You're new, so we want to test you out. You get 5 pages to tell a whole story, right? I'm like, 5 pages? I can do that. I've been doing PowerPoint for 20 years. You want a whole story in 5 pages? I can do 5, right? So that's exactly what happened. I did Wonder Woman. It wasn't 5 pages. I think they gave me 10 pages to do a whole story, right? This is the difference between writing prose and writing for comics, or even writing for animation, because what's the cutoff in terms of animation, right? What are you writing for? You're not writing for pages, right? What are you writing?
Episodes?
Right, but no, how do you know how much you're going to write?
Storyboard? Or like scenes?
The scenes, no, but what's the equivalent of pages in animation?
Frames.
It's time, right? If your episode is, I don't know, 30 minutes or whatever, you can't just keep writing and writing and writing. You have a specific amount of time, and especially if you're doing your own thing and you have to finance yourself, you're like, okay, 5 minutes, right? You got to tell a whole story in that. So you have to be able to tell a story within a specific, it's a medium of economy. You have to be able to do that, right? So I highly recommend you start off with comics rather than animation, simply because it's a lot easier to get into. You don't have to raise a tremendous, unless you're animating yourself, okay? Maybe you are, then do whatever. That's great, right? Like this whole series, I don't even know how much it cost Netflix, but it's an expensive thing to do animation, right? Let's see. Hold on. Oh. Yeah. So inciting incident. That's what I was just talking about with my friend Georgia. You're asking, how did I do it? Literally, it was a glass of wine, okay? It was a glass of wine at Harvard where she's like, yeah, she sold me on this idea. It's like, she will write and I'll just do the rest. I'm like, okay, right, I'll find some artists, I'll get, and so she convinced me to take a writing class. And I'm like, I write PowerPoint. I do this kind of stuff. I talk to you all and I tell a story, but I don't make up stories, right? But she's like, just take this writing class because creative people are different. You got to understand how creative people think. If you're going to hire I'm like, okay, I buy that. let me take this class. And so I took the class. It was an online class. And it turns out, so I show up online, and it's me and 12 guys. It's me and 12 guys who are already arguing about who's going to win in a fight. And I'm like, I don't even know who these characters are. I'm like Wikipediaing everything because I'm like, who's Colossus? I don't even know who Colossus is. Or they're like talking about Martian Manhunter. Does anyone know who Martian Manhunter is? You do? Okay. I'm like, who the fuck is Martian Manhunter? Right? But the point is, right, something like this. So the guy who was running the class is an ex-Marvel editor. He's like, you got 5 pages. That's the assignment. 5 pages. Beginning, middle, and end. Can you do a story beginning, middle, and end in 5 pages in comics? Which means the average panel count per page is 4 to 6 panels, okay? So you're telling a whole story. Like, look, this is what you're doing, right? Every panel is a snapshot in time, meaning that you can't do, you really can only show one major action. So it's not like you can even have someone coming into the room and sitting down in one panel. That's like 3 panels, okay? So can you tell a whole story in 5 pages? Most people can't, right? And most of the guys couldn't, frankly, do it because they're still arguing about who would win in this fight. Where I'm like, oh, 5 pages, okay, so I did it. And he's like, oh, let's talk about Amy's story. Like, I'm not really doing this. This is not. I'm just doing this to help my friend. And he's like, no, it's a really good story. And so that became my first published story. Because what happens is they were like, well, you're wondering how does one break in, okay? Because someone you don't just get to work in the Batman group or Wonder Woman by showing up and say, hey, I can write. You never seen anything I've done, but I can write. Go ahead, trust me with your characters. To do this, you literally have to self-publish. So what I started doing was publishing stories because my friend Georgia. So I was publishing her stories, and you're also wondering, so whatever happened to Georgia, right? Because Georgia's like, she did her indie film. It was called Red Doors. It was really good, but it's indie, and so nothing ever happened really with it. But this is the difference: is that her best friend is married to a guy named David Alpert. Does anyone know David Alpert? Does that ring a bell? Here's the thing. If you are going to do this business, you got to know who everyone is. And David Alpert is the producer of The Walking Dead. So David was like, "Oh, hey, Georgia, you wanna direct this little film that he's also invested in." So next thing I know is that Georgia's like, "I got to do this." I'm like, "Wait, I just set up this whole company to, make comics," and I'm like, "I guess I'll make comics." Right? I'm just going to publish my own stories. And so that's what happened. So I started publishing the first stories that I was writing. And then people were like, oh, these are really good, actually. Like, oh, really? That's kind of wild. And so then that's when you are, so again, back to the question of what happened to my career. It's like, well, once somebody says, like, first of all, I mean, how many years have I been basically peddling pharmaceutical companies with, whatever? Nobody's ever like, oh my God, that just made me cry, right? When you write a story and people are like, oh my God, that made me cry, it's a totally different experience where I'm like, I got to keep doing this. Also, to be honest, right, there's still the 12 guys who are like, what are you doing here? I'm like, I'll show you. I'm going to write Deadpool. Assholes. Because they're like, that would be really funny. She could write Deadpool, right. I'm like, yeah, all right, now I'm going to show. So 5 years later, I did write Deadpool. Just out of spite, okay? Just out of spite.
Best motivation.
Yeah, it's like not the best use of my time because I was also going to Harvard Business School reunion. They're like, I'm sorry, what are you doing now? I'm like, yeah, but look, I'm writing Deadpool, okay?
Fun writing Deadpool? Because I know Deadpool is a very funny character.
Yeah. So it's hard though. That's the thing. I never realized I could be so funny. All right, first of all, but yeah, I do enjoy writing Deadpool and Rick and Morty though is a lot harder.
Really?
Yeah, Rick and Morty, to be honest, so Rick and Morty, you'll see my credits here. This is actually my son. He had to help me with it. So what this was, is, how many of you watched Dune, the movie Dune? Yeah? Okay. It's a parody of Dune. It's like, heretics of Rick. The thing is, Rick humor is a little tough for me. So I had to bring in my teenage son. He's like, oh yeah, look, sorry. Sometimes you just need that. It's not like you can write everything, and I'm like, all right, I need you to help me out with the script. So he helped me out with some of the Rick moments.
Is there any like notable ones?
What's that?
Is there any like notable ones that you can think of?
For what?
Like in the book, I guess.
Well, okay, so first of all, this is how things work too. When you are in this business and somebody says, hey, do you want to write Rick and Morty? You're like, yeah, hell yeah, I'll write Rick and... I don't know Rick and Morty. I literally had to spend the weekend binging Rick and Morty because I just said yes. And then I was like, oh, I should not have said yes because I'm like literally going through and I'm like watching Pickle Rick and I'm like, what is going on? I am Gen X, by the way. I'm like, what is this? I don't get this. And then my kids, of course, are like, you don't know Pickle Rick. I'm like, why are you watching that? You're not of age to watch that. Yeah, so, but to stay relevant, right, I have to do that. So. Yeah, so I am very proud of this considering no idea. I was like, I kind of know it's a cartoon, but just to show my versatility, I did it. And, right, because it's very different from writing Wonder Woman. It's very different from writing just about anything, to be honest. And that's what you need to be able to do. If you want to be a writer, is not just to write your one favorite thing, okay? It's true that you can stick with the same genre. Most people, like let's say if you're a horror writer, you're probably going to keep writing horror. But I'm the kind of person, I also want to stay employed. So I try to write almost everything just because I like it, yeah.
Oh, because like you say you never knew what Rick and Morty was. So like, how do you go about writing for characters you know nothing about? Like,
well, you spend the entire weekend watching. I actually had to fast forward through some of them too, right? Same thing with Borderlands. To be honest, I don't really know Borderlands, but if they're going to ask me to write Borderlands, I'm like, I'm gonna. Borderlands was harder too because I'm a purist. I would have preferred to play the whole game. I do like playing games, but here's the other thing: if you want to write, or if you're an artist, video games are death, right? Because you get sucked into it, and you got deadlines, right? So I would have wanted because also they were sending me all the games. This is great, right? I was getting all this free stuff, and I'm like, I don't have time to play it, so. Once again, I had to use my kids, and they're like, why don't you just watch the video walkthrough? I'm like, that's kind of a cheat. I'm very old school that way, but I'm like, no, you're right. I just got to watch the video. So that's the thing. We just do that. Now, for something like Wonder Woman, it's not as simple. And Wonder Woman is, 80 years old? I'm not going to read every single Wonder Woman, right? The most efficient way to go about it is to try to figure out your way into the character, which is, what's the core of the character? As long as you understand that, the editors are also the ones who will tell you what you can or cannot do. Because you're like, okay, so first of all, it's not like you get to do everything. The editor is the one who hires you. The editor says, okay, and they're always very careful. They're like, no promises, but pitch us an idea, and if we like it, we'll go with it, right? So if you're like, okay, here's the thing. Wonder Woman turns into a zombie, they're going to be like, interesting, but no. Okay, so you don't have to worry about it. They will reach out to you because they know that you have a certain voice, and then they want you to come up with the idea. And if they don't like the idea, you don't get the job. It's as simple as that. So if it is something that they like, that's when they're like, yeah, we like that, but can we do this with it? Usually, it'll be something like, usually it's going to be, yeah, we like it, but you can't use Nightwing, or something like that, right? That's just the way it is. All right. Or they'll be like, you can use Nightwing, but we prefer you not because it's going to, whatever, it's just going to slow things up. So if you can avoid using that. If they're good editors, they will say, you do as you want, and we'll do our best to make it happen. But but they're also hiring you because they know you're not going to just kill off all the characters. They're hiring you because you're a professional, right? So that's generally how it works. Let's see. So how did I get into animation? Because I wrote 28 issues of Red Sonja, and the showrunner read my comics and was like, oh, I really like what you did with that character. Here's a job. Okay, it didn't work out that way, actually, because he was talking so fast, I didn't realize he was offering me a job. And in Hollywood, they do it like that. I was just like, what? And I called back and said, did you just offer me a job? He's like, oh, I'm really sorry. I already offered to somebody else because you didn't respond. It was like, that was 3 days ago. It's like, that's Hollywood, right? So that's the other thing. Somebody offers you a job, take it. right then and there. I just didn't understand because he was talking so fast. He was just like, and this is happening. I didn't realize he was talking about Dota, Dragon's Blood. I know nothing. It's a game I haven't played. I haven't played Dota. So if you're interested, I don't know if I can even show you. Let me see if I can show you some stuff. Let's see. Now you can see how messy my stuff is because I'm working on a gazillion things at once, right? Oh, this is the lost slide that I did not show at Harvard, right? Because everyone was already so worked up about everything. This is really what I wanted to show. I'm showing it to you, but I lost it at Harvard, and they didn't really want to hear this anyway, okay? Because they were still like thinking it was really funny, because I went right, I feel bad. How many of you know the brand Sol de Janeiro, the skincare line? No? Yeah, anyway, so the CEO of Sol de Janeiro was supposed to go after me, but I kind of preempted her because, anyway, everyone thought I was so funny, and she was not funny at all. She was trying to, talk about how great, her company is really great, actually. I like her products, but, at Harvard, you're supposed to talk about how great you are, not about stuff like this where everything is by accident. So, so there's that. All right, and tell me if you want to see anything in particular, but I'm just trying to see if I can find stuff to show you. Oh, yeah, this is the script I just turned in. Let me show you, first of all, a real script. And it's very similar to an animation script, too. They look very similar. It's going to show up. Come on. Yeah, there we go. Okay, now, the thing about script writing, and it's true almost for, let's say you're an artist, first of all. So everyone's, oh my God, it must be so hard to break in. Yes and no. The truth is, if you can do it, you will get a job. If you are good enough to draw Spider-Man 300 times in 30 days, you're going to get the job. It's just that most people can't do it, right? Because you may spend the entire week drawing one Spider-Man. You're like, look at this. I'm like, that's cool, but it's a monthly book. Can you do it 300 more times on model with perspective? And oh, by the way, can you also draw Aunt May? Most people spend all their time drawing either sexy Poison Ivy or super buff Spider-Man, or not Spider-Man, but you're right. They don't think about, well, you actually have to draw all the other characters too. Okay, so that's what I'm saying in general. If you are aspiring to be an artist, if you can do it, you will get the job because they're dying for people and most people can't do it, which is why if you've been drawing Spider-Man for 20 years, you're probably going to continue drawing Spider-Man for another 20 years. If you just graduated from art school and you want to draw Spider-Man, you're not going to draw Spider-Man for this simple reason. It's like running a marathon. They'll be like, that's cool. Come back in a year when you can show us that you actually hit a 30-day deadline. And most people can't do that, all right? It's just, right? Because you can't do that now. You won't be able to do it until you prove that you can do it. And that's when they're like, oh, we want you on this book right now. Because, right, there's a very limited pool of people who can do that. Now, writers are similar. I have to be able to do a 20-page script in a week. Yeah. So you spent 6 months writing something, awesome, you can self-publish. But you will not be writing Wonder Woman because every month you need to have a new script, 20 pages. It's got to be 20 good pages too, not just stuff that you just kind of, right? And you're like, well, 20 pages, I could do that. It's not that simple, simply because, and I'm just showing you, this is, this is a first draft? Okay. What it is, and this is where I feel very lucky, and probably why I can do this, is that I studied architecture. Architecture is all about designing. I'm designing a house, I'm designing a campus center, and when you're designing with specifications. You're like, okay, this room has to seat 60 people, there has to be 2 bathrooms, there has to be enough hallway, right? That's like storytelling. I have to be able to fit, especially superhero, 20 pages, I gotta fit, this is your expectation. I don't know how many of you read comics. Does anyone read comics? Oh, okay, what comics do you read?
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, okay. What do you read? Oh, all right.
Must be manga.
Okay, so it doesn't matter. Even manga, your expectations, especially for Spider-Man, you don't want Spider-Man just talking the whole time, right?
Yeah, definitely.
right? And I did write some Spider-Man. I wrote some Spider-Man noir. In general, Spider-Man, like most characters, you want Spider-Man to fight. You want Spider-Man to do his thing, okay? 20 pages, that means probably 2 fight scenes. A fight scene is generally going to take at least 4 pages. So I just used up 8 pages of my 20, right? Now, every good comics writer, you always have to start off, even if you know Spider-Man, you don't know what's going on. So the first 2 pages, you need to catch up. 2 pages a recap, what's going on. So there's another 2 pages gone. So now I got 10 pages left. I haven't even gotten to the ending yet, right? So character development plus an ending plus a cliffhanger, I'm now down to 10 pages. Cliffhanger plus any good story, you got to have a little emotional roller coaster, right? That's going to be like 3 pages. I only have 4 pages left? So this is how you have to work, right? Because you can't go back to your editor and say, hey, can I have an extra page? It doesn't work like that. You only get 20 pages, okay? And then sometimes your artist will be like, hey, can I do a double page spread? Because I love drawing Spider-Man, okay? I got you. I'll figure it out. Oh, wait. Right? Stuff like that. You got to work that all out, okay? Plus, when we're doing this, right, if it's Spider-Man or if it's Wonder Woman, it doesn't matter. If you want to make your artists happy and you want to make your readers happy, you're not going to do a little panel with Spider-Man. You want Spider-Man to do a full page splash doing something super cool, all right? So that's 1 page already just for that one cool moment, and usually you want at least 3 pages of that, right? So all this stuff takes up room. And so you have to think that, you have to be able to think that way, is what I'm trying to say. And that is very similar to design and architecture. So it just so happened that worked really well for me. Not that you have to be an architect to do this, but I was like, oh, I get this. I totally get this. And this is why pros and TV writers have such a hard time writing comics, because you're used to just writing. And then you're like, oh, wait, I overwrote. And that's usually what happens. So when you're reading a comic and you see a lot of text, it's usually because they're a TV writer or some kind of prose writer. Because that big balloon full of stuff is now on somebody's forehead and looks terrible. So for me, I don't write that way. I write visually first, and then I write essentially to fill in that space. And so this is why artists like working with me, because they know I'm not going to overwrite. So, so this is a typical script. This is something I just turned in. So don't read it because it's total spoilers. Anyway. This is the second issue of Carmilla. This is actually probably the end of that. And ask me questions while we're doing this, because I think I only have 20 minutes left anyway.
How do you manage your time? Like how do you find time to do stuff that you like outside of work?
You don't.
Oh.
No. No, that's not true. I just went to Cherry Mall. I just went to the mall, and I went to the Lego store, which is my favorite place, right? Because I find it relaxing. I go to the Lego store and I do that. You just have to prioritize your time, like anything else. I mean, it's like any job, except the problem is a lot of jobs, you do it and you just do it and you're done. With this kind of stuff, you're never done because you think, oh my God, I could have done this better. Let me go back and revise. And suddenly your editor's like, I really need it right now. And then you got to turn it in. And that's, oh, here we go. Let's, oh, actually working. Let's see. This is Property on Netflix. Yeah. This is actually, which episode is this? 206. Did I write this? I may or not have written it. Let's see. I think I wrote it. Yeah, so this is, it's too bad. I don't think there's sound. Yeah, I did write this. Okay. So yeah, actually, this is good. This is the second episode I was able to write for the second season, and I'm not. This is not just because I worked on it, because I really lucked out, by the way, too. Because if you do get the offer to be in the writers' room, usually that means you've got to move to LA, and you're there the entire day, sitting in a room like this. Not a room like this, but you're sitting in a conference room with 6 other people, and you're spending every day hammering out story. Whereas when you're in comics, it's just by yourself. And because I did not jump on the offer initially and he gave it to somebody else, he came back and said, no, I carved out a freelance position for you, meaning that I did not have to be in the room. Because first of all, I'm a mom. I got 2 kids. I live in New Jersey. So it turns out that I could just go whenever I wanted and I'll just turn in my episodes. But that's not how it normally is. So in fact, it was even better that I did not jump on it because it's very rare to get a freelance position, which means that I could just I don't phone it in, right? But you don't get to do that very often. And I'm still guaranteed 2 episodes, which means, and that qualified me for the WGA. So now I'm in the Writers Guild, which is kind of important, right? Because that's kind of like an accreditation thing. It's even better than having gone to Harvard. Nobody cares I went to Harvard, but they care that I'm WGA. I'm like, oh, you're WGA. Okay. So, and I'm only that because of this, right? Oh, this is cool because I'm going to see Yuri Lowenthal and who's that other guy? Tony Todd. Does anyone know Tony Todd? Yeah. So they're going to be in Minneapolis, so I'll be there for that show with them. So.
Have you met Yuri before?
Yeah, I know Yuri. Like, what? Do you know? How do you know Yuri?
Isn't Yuri? He's the voice of Spider-Man in the games, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Because what do I know? I don't get to play games.
The game just came out the other day, and I'm like a big fan of his. So.
He's super nice.
He's a voice for a few characters.
He's a voice for a lot of characters. His wife is super nice too. They're very nice.
They went to Rutgers.
Do you have any inspiration for yourself when it comes to your writings? Like, do you just are there any writings from other screenwriters that kind of rub off on you, or comic writers?
Comic writers, yeah. Here's the thing: everything, something like this, it's all about craft. So you should always study. People are good at it. Like Yuri is a great voice actor. Study, if you want to be a voice actor, study him. If you're going to write, study good writers. So absolutely, Brian K. Vaughan is somebody that I think is one of the best writers. But it also depends on what. I will study Mark Waid because he does great recap. So I will study Mark Waid. Gail Simone is great at doing the weirdo characters, right? Like, so I will study her because she has a unique voice, and I aspire to be funny. I was never funny growing up. I had to cultivate being funny. That's not something that comes naturally. It's weirdly enough a craft to learn how to write a certain way. Writing horror is another kind of craft, right? So anything I'm doing, I need to study animation, right? This is a different kind of writing. It was really hard because when you're writing comics, you just need to get that thing in, and because it has to be good enough that the editor's like, okay, good enough, send it to the artist. The artist looks at it and is like, okay, I understand what to do, because a script is not for you guys. A script is for the art team or the animation studio. So that's what you're writing. You're writing dialogue. If I'm writing dialogue for Yuri, right? So that's a very specific kind of writing. You cannot tell Yuri that. So when you do dialogue, and this is what I learned, because when I write dialogue for comics, I'm writing for the letterer to literally just put it on the page and you read it as it is. When you're writing dialogue for Yuri, it's not what you see is what you get. Yuri does not want 2 exclamation points at the end, because now I'm telling him how to say the line, right? That's not cool. So I'm like, oh, okay, take out all that punctuation, because in comics, we need that, because you're reading it and you need to be able to interpret it and say, oh, there's the exclamation point, that's a moment. But that, for Yuri, no, you can't do that, right? He's the one who interprets how he's going to say it. So you see there's the differences there. So I had to learn how not to do that. But again, that's also the showrunner saying, no, redo that because of that. So let me see if I can show you some other stuff here. I don't know what else I have here. I think I'm about to run out of time too, so ask me whatever you want to ask me.
Would you say that, like, once you get in the, like, because I hear a lot of people say that a hard part is when you get in, is trying to stay in,
Oh, right, yes,
Would you say
absolutely.
that, like, I guess the best way to do that is to keep up that work ethic, or would you?
Yeah,
more
it's not like people don't have a work ethic unless they're playing video games. I have it.
Yeah.
I see that, or we all know who's the one who was late because they got some new game came out. But most people know not to do that. It's not even that. I would say for you have to already have the work ethic. I think the hardest part is most artists and creatives don't understand how to market themselves. We're not trained that way. So you're kind of like, oh, I got my one DC, one Marvel story. Now all the offers are going to come in, and they don't. So learning how to hustle is actually very key, like how to get more work. Literally, so I'm doing this show with Yuri and Tony Todd and whatever, and then I had a co-writer who lives near Minneapolis. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna be at the show, and I realized, oh shoot, he's not a guest at the show. He's like, yeah, I think they forgot about me. They don't know that I live there, and I'm like, dude, they're not gonna call you. You actually have to say, hey, I'm here, I live here, right? I would love to be a guest at your show. You kind of have to be able to do that. He's just like, yeah, I guess I'll just stay home, right? I'm like, oh, I'm like, just, you can hang out with me, I'll get you in, but you got to be able to, I didn't say this, right? But that's the reason he's always just co-writing. When I say that, that's not fair, right? He's known for Ghostbusters, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, not like he's not done anything, but he's terrible at self-marketing. You kind of have to be out there and say, look, I wrote Ghostbusters, I wrote Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I want to write this now. And he doesn't do that. He just kind of like, okay, just give me more Ghostbusters,
Like, do you pitch, like, how do you decide what you want to work on? Do you go out of your way to ask, or do you go off of you mostly?
Well, I am in a very fortunate position. Usually people ask me right now. But the thing is, and this is absolutely correct, right? They're not asking me, will you write Superman or Batman? They're always like, hey, we got this lame-o, sexy female character. Can you fix her up so that she has some agency? So I got plenty of work like that. But they're not like, hey, will you write Batman? So what I need to do is say, I want to write Batman. Okay, so that's what I need to do, but I'm too busy writing these sexy female characters, right? So the female editors are great, because the female editors, I hope this is not being recorded. The female editors are great. That's how I wrote Deadpool, because she's like, okay, enough with this sexy female characters, right? I mean, I got Poison Ivy, right? But she was one that's like, you should write Deadpool. I'm like, yes, that's what I need, right? Same with Green Hornet. I am the first woman to write the Green Hornet series. But of course, what happens is they're like, you can have Green Hornet, but we want to make Green Hornet a female. I'm like, what? I think the whole point of me doing this is so I could write the male Green Hornet, not to turn Green Hornet. But I mean, you take what you can get, right? I'm still getting paid. So this is an example of Katana, where I'm like, Katana, what is she doing with chopsticks in her hair? I don't get this, right? They're like, yeah, well, you don't have to do Katana, but I'm like, all right, at least I can do something with her. But the main thing is I wanted to write Cyborg and Blue Beetle. So they let me do that. So then I'm like, okay, well, we'll do Katana too. But so this is now stuck. But so this is something I did, was it spring or was it last spring? I don't remember. But so this was kind of fun because, right, usually the editor at a certain point will be just like, this looks good, let's just run with this. But your job is to say, I could have probably added a fourth character in here, but that gets really complicated, all right? So the more characters you add, the more difficult it's going to be, really. So whenever you're writing Avengers, right, you got to give credit to the people who write all the characters so they're all doing stuff. That's the hard part, because it's very easy to forget about one character. Like, wait, what happened to this character? Got to put them in and give them a storyline, and that gets really complicated. Don't forget, your job is also to keep track of all the weapons. This happens all the time. I'm like, shoot, where was the sword? Where's the sword now, right? These are the things that it's your job. If that weapon disappears and now there's another fight, you're like, wait, where was the weapon all this time, right? It is your job, not the artist will be like, really pissed, right? Because you didn't tell me where does that sword come from? That has to be your job to figure it out the whole time. Is there a horse? Are they right? How are they getting from point A to point B? It can't be a mystery. You have to work all these things out, right? So that's another thing, 20 pages, you got to get people, you can't stay 20 pages in the same room. People have to move around, otherwise it gets really boring. So how do they get there, right? You can't just suddenly go from, you can, but, right? You'd be like, wait, how did they get there, right? That takes some time. That usually takes another page of moving people from point A to point B. You can't just say zoom, unless there's a portal. But even though the portal, you got to set up the portal, you got to go through the portal, you got to end up on the other side. It still takes a couple panels. So all these things eats up your real estate. And again, that's your job to make it all fit, because if you're a comic book reader, you're the one who's the first person to say, man, that pacing was off. What a sucky writer, right? It's always the writer's fault, right? It's like, why was that ending rushed? You know, it's like, well, you try it, okay? So that's why I always write the ending first, and then I move backwards, because people don't really care so much about the middle, but if you do the ending really well, then people are like, oh, that was good. So that's what matters. Okay. So any questions? That's basically it.
Do you know any like animators? I guess have you ever worked with any animators, or you don't work in that well?
So generally, again, my only experience has been with two animated series where you're working with the studios. So you don't really work with one single animator. You work with a studio who gets hired. So usually there is one liaison, and usually that's also taking place between the showrunner and whoever's the head of the studio, whoever's the head of the project. So if there is feedback from the animation studio, that kind of filters over, but you don't work directly with somebody. It's literally they get the script. And first of all, as you know, right, it doesn't even just go to the studio. Who gets the script first? Who and what part is done in animation first? Well, no,
You just told me.
it's the voice actors. The voice actors do everything first. Okay. I mean, obviously there is a director and whatever, but everything is recorded first. The voices are done first. So that's usually the first cut. That's when you know, like Yuri is reading the script. Not when I say first, I mean before the studio, before any work occurs, it's going to be that. Okay. So if there's any feedback, again, it's not going to, like, Yuri's not going to complain about his lines to me directly, right? I should ask him, actually. But, because he's nice enough. He probably doesn't even remember, because voice actors, they're going through a lot of stuff anyway. It's not like they're acting, like in the actual film. They're doing the voice act, so they can do multiple things, just as I can as a writer. Yeah.
So besides like creating your own work and like promoting your own work and things like that, is there somewhere where you can go for people that are looking for writers that you would recommend?
What do you mean, like, if you want to hire a writer or you want to be the writer?
Yeah, if for people who want to be writers, is there somewhere that they can go where people are just looking for writers?
You mean for comics or for animation?
Either one really.
It doesn't work like that because everyone wants to do it.
Yeah.
So you literally have to do it.
Okay.
Okay, so in other words, you have to have actually written a spec script for animation.
Okay.
And that's literally how they can tell. They'll look at it and say, oh. Or they'll be like, oh. Right? Because it's the same thing as drawing. It's really hard to write good scripts. It's really hard. So if I see, I can tell now. If I look at it, I'm like, oh, you're good. Or, look, I mean, my son is 20. He sent me a cover letter for this internship. And I looked at him like, right? You can't even know what's good and what's not, all right? So I was just like, anyway. He helped me with Rick and Morty. That's a different kind of writing. But man, a cover letter for an internship, I was just like, what are you writing? Okay, I mean, there is a skill, as you all know, to writing a cover letter, and it's not like tooting your own horn, right? The skill in writing a cover letter is that you're trying to market yourself for a job. What do you bring to the table? Same thing with the script. First of all, if there's any errors whatsoever, that's it. You're done. Because if you cannot even spell check, And most people apparently can't. But also, how you write it, there's a skill to getting the reader from the top to the bottom of the page. If I have to slog through, as I did with my kids, cover letter, I was just like, dude, this person is going to get 500 cover letters, if not more. They're going to speed through it. If they have to scroll through more than twice in the email, you're done, okay? I would have thought that was obvious, but it's not anyway. So what I'm saying is, same thing for a script, is a showrunner's going to look at it and say, did you get to the point? Is your dialogue on point? Can Yuri do, it's not Dragon, what is he, Davion? Can you do good Dragon Knight, right? Is that voice there? Are the descriptions good? Are they eloquent enough? And plot, too. Plot is really difficult. So did you get me to turn the page or not? If I can't turn the page because I'm still like, wait, I don't even understand what's going on, right? Which was the danger of Rick and Morty, where I'm like, I cannot channel Rick, okay? You have to be able to do that to get the person to turn the page. So that's why you actually have to write and show you can write. Same thing for comics. Now, you can get by, let's say you team up with an experienced comics artist, and you print it up, and you're at New York Comic Con, you're passing it out, and people are like, this is really good, but because of the art. But the writing still has to be good enough to turn the page, and that's essentially what I did, is I printed up a bunch of copies, and I'm at New York Comic Con peddling my stuff. And somebody, the wife of one of the artists, came up to me. She said, I never read comics. I'm not into comics. It's my husband's thing. But I really liked your story. I'm like, holy shit, right? That's what you have to do, right? Because then you know you're good enough. Because at some point they are looking for people, but you have to be good enough, okay? And being good enough means that whole thing about, did you recap? Did you actually have a good ending? I'm grading. I teach at the School of Visual Arts in New York, and I just had people send. I had them write a pitch. Half of the pitches, the ending kind of like, you know what I mean? They started off good. It's a fantasy world. There's a brother and a sister. They're going through the lands, and wait, where's the ending? Where's the ending, right? Then that's an automatic fail. You don't have the ending there. All right, it's actually really hard. So if you can do all the things right, you will actually be able to do it, because most people can't do it. But if you can do it, then you will get at least one shot, and that's where it's like, how do you stay in? You got to keep coming up with the good endings, right? And you got to hustle and say, hey, I wrote this great story. I work with this book, and then the editor will be like, oh yeah, they're good, and you're like, I have a million ideas. You know, anytime I get, Carmilla, whatever, you have to you can't be like, I don't have any ideas. Then you're done. Anyway, so that's my story. I hope I covered enough of it. You can, I want to say follow me on YouTube. I don't really have a YouTube thing. I'm on Instagram, Amy_Chu. Twitter, I kind of have to bail because, so I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Facebook. I write comics, and so I will go on YouTube more, because I think I need to start there. If you do a search on YouTube, there's a good hour where I talk about my process, and people seem to like that. So go do the search, and I basically talk how I break down story. Okay, and that's like a whole nother thing. But yeah.
All right, everyone, let's give a round of applause to Miss Amy.
So anyway.